You might wonder if AI systems are so capable, then companies will use them to do pretty much everything they pay human beings to do. And if they don't, they'll go out of business. What does a world look like where machines do all the work, we become enfeebled?
Like some kids of billionaires are absolutely useless. Is that what we're...
Yes, in fact, we would all be kids of billionaires. And, one obvious consequence would be that we lose the incentive to learn, we lose the incentive to be independent, to achieve. In a sense, our civilization would end because it would no longer be a human civilization.
When that happens, we will need to have a conversation at places like this event about, how do we organize our economy, right? How do humans find meaning, right? There are a lot of assumptions we made when humans were the most intelligent species on the planet that are going to be invalidated by what's happening with AI. And I think the only good thing about it is that we'll all be in the same boat. I'm actually afraid of the world where 30% of human labor becomes fully automated by AI, and the other 70%. That's going to cause this just incredible, class war between the groups that have been and the groups that haven't been. If we're all in the same boat, it's not going to be easy, but I actually feel better about it because we're going to have to sit down and say, whoa, it's not like we're randomly picking every third person and saying you're useless. We're all in the same boat. We've recognized that we've reached the point as a technological civilization where the idea, there's huge abundance and huge economic value, but the idea that the way to distribute that value is for humans to produce economic labor, and this is where they feel their sense of self-worth. Once that idea gets invalidated, we're all going to have to sit down and figure it out. And, I'm not going to lie, my true belief is that is coming. I think AI companies are going to be at the center of that or maybe in the crosshairs of that. And, we need to have a responsibility to have an answer there.
That doesn't mean the transition won't be messy. In fact, I expect it in some ways to be pretty painful. Just having looked at history, that in 2 generations, society can absorb any amount of technologically driven labor market change. But we've never had to do this in like 10 years or 5 years or whatever this is going to be.
If you look at the prior industrial revolutions, respectively, they took 80, 60, and about 40 years to take place, right? And what we're talking about is this next wave is going to be a 5 to 10 years max. And, when you're working with a physical world and billions of people, that's just not enough time, especially when we have governments that move at the pace that they do, and how behind they are in understanding this technology. The US is around 65% white collar workers. And those are the first people that are going to be impacted by AI-induced job displacements.
I think we're near guaranteed at this point to have effectively models that are capable of automating any white-collar job by like 27, 28, or near guaranteed end of decade.
The first question I always ask programmers is, what language do you program in? And the correct answer is it doesn't matter. Because you're trying to design for an outcome, you don't care what code is generated by the computer. The vast majority of programmers will be replaced by AI programmers.
If I look at coding, programming, which is one area where AI is making the most progress, what we are finding is we are not far from a world, I think we'll be there in 3 to 6 months, where AI is writing 90% of the code. And then in 12 months, we may be in a world where AI is writing essentially all of the code.
The US is not well positioned to realize the ambitious economic benefits of AGI without widespread unemployment and accompanying societal unrest.
The era we've come to is sort of the vision that computing was expensive and it basically became free. The era that we're just starting is that intelligence is rare, a great doctor, a great teacher. And with AI, over the next decade, that will become free, commonplace, great medical advice, great tutoring. And it's kind of profound because it solves all these specific problems, like we don't have enough doctors or, mental health professionals. But it brings with it kind of so much change. What will jobs be like? Should we, just work like 2 or 3 days a week?
Will we still need humans?
Not for most things. We'll decide.
Hosting a talk show, definitely.
I would not be shocked if somebody's AI model in less than 3 years, beat human experts on a regular basis. Let's put it that way.
What are the specific bottlenecks? Like, why?
Humans, here they are. Bottleneck. Hi, good to see you. And some of you are terrified. You're going to be even bigger bottlenecks. That's fine. It's part of free speech. But my goodness, once it starts changing what the world looks like, there will be much more opposition.
You don't get many people digging ditches anymore because a backhoe is just much better at digging ditches than a person. It's going to be the same for almost all mundane intellectual labor. An AI system is going to make a much better paralegal than a person. It's going to cause the rich to get richer because we're going to get big increases in productivity. And where's that wealth going to go to? It's going to go to rich people, and poor people are going to get poorer. I don't know what to do about that. Universal basic income helps, stops them starving, but it doesn't really solve the problem because people's dignity is gone if they don't have a job.
If this is half as big as you seem to think it is, it's going to be the single most disruptive thing to hit labor markets ever, given how compressed the time period in which it will arrive is, right? It took a long time to lay down electricity. It took a long time to build railroads. There's just a lot of jobs that are doing work behind a computer. And as companies absorb machines that can do work behind a computer for you, that will change their hiring.
It will affect every single job out there. Don't put your head in the sand. There are a lot of companies who don't want to talk about it openly because we're scaring people about jobs. It is going to replace jobs. So did the tractor and fertilizer. So if you want to create 40 million jobs, I can do that with 2 pieces of legislation. You can no longer use tractors on farms, and you can no longer use fertilizer. You're going to need 40 million people working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, making $6 an hour. You create a lot of great jobs.
There's huge commercial pressure to build AIs with greater and greater agency to replace human labor.
We're displacing human labor, and we're going to crash human wages. And so, to give an example of this, economists just sort of covered it, and they were looking at, well, what happens to economic output under the case of like no change and then sort of very strong AI, without having to go into what AGI is. You see that output GDP is just going to start like going up by multiples. But what happens to human wages looks like this. And it's not like the AI companies actually have a plan, by the way, because we talk with all of them. They have a couple of people thinking about it. But this is about to wash over society. It is easy to want to look away because it's just so intense.
Hardly anyone you know, including yourself, is prepared to live in actual moving history. No one at the beginning of the printing press had any real idea of the changes it would bring. No one at the beginning of the fossil fuel era had much of an idea of the changes it would bring. No one is good at predicting the longer-term or even medium-term outcomes of these radical technological changes.
Psychosocially, it's very disturbing that you can no longer tell people what kind of world they should prepare their kids or grandkids for.
Yeah. I also think kids are going to have a junior year existential crisis of what do I do? How do I future-proof myself? What does the world going forward look like? I think there could be a massive loss of enthusiasm where a feeling of malaise settles over young people who are just like, why bother? I'm just going to get destroyed by AI. They're going to be able to do it better than me.
We're entering a world where certain people will never get a job interview because AI like dinged certain things about their profile. Essentially, like companies will just start using an AI screen for everything, and then if you run afoul on one screen, you're probably going to run afoul of all the other screens too. And so it's like, I'm permanently on the outside looking in. That's the kind of dystopia we're fast approaching.
I think we're at what late February 2020 was for COVID, but for AI. And if you're paying attention, you kind of have an idea of the general direction in which the world is headed. You know that, as was the case with COVID, within a very short amount of time, every single world leader, every single CEO, every single institution, members of the general public are going to realize pretty soon that the main thing we as a world are dealing with is COVID, or in this case, AI. And it was in the initial early months of COVID when many of the most important decisions were made. Decisions which ended up either saving or costing millions of lives.
If you look at like Congress talking about social media, whenever Mark Zuckerberg and other CEOs show up, the cluelessness that Congress has about how technology works is incredible. It's heartbreaking.
I agree completely, but that's what scares me.
The response is when they start to get dangerous, we'll really get it together. The politicians will pass the right laws. Engineers will solve the right problems. We are not that good at many of those things. We take forever, and we are not early. We are 2 years away according to prediction markets. This is not a biased CEO fundraising. This is what smartest people, super forecasters, are thinking of this problem.
Several OpenAI staff have been telling friends that they are both jazzed and spooked by recent progress.
And I feel urgency. I really think we need to do something in 2025. If we get to the end of 2025 and we've still done nothing about this, then I'm going to be worried.